Today. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Principal Ruth. We've been trying to navigate this for about 4 or 5 months, but my trial schedule has been a bit hectic, so I'm glad that I was finally able to be here. My name is Kimberly Cocroft. I am one of 17 judges in the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas General Division. What we do in the General Division is felony criminal cases. So everything that you see on the 11 o'clock news, murder, rape, robbery, kidnapping, felonious assault, trafficking in drugs, Medicaid fraud, that's what I do every single day. I also handle civil cases where the parties are suing for $15,000 or more. So that could be personal injury, wrongful death, medical malpractice. That is what I do, and I have done that for 14 years, which is amazing because I'm only 18. Actually, that's not true. Actually, I just turned 50 last Wednesday, so yay for me. So I've been doing that for 14 years. Prior to serving as a judge, I worked as Deputy Chief Counsel for Governor Ted Strickland, and I wrote executive orders, directives. I worked with the 26th Chief Counsel of the state's executive agencies, represented the governor in state and federal court. Before that, I was an associate attorney in private practice doing employment and business litigation. And before that, I clerked for Justice Alice Ruby Resnick at the Supreme Court of Ohio. So I've done a lot of different things, but being a judge is my favorite. Clearly, I like to walk and talk. Don't be intimidated if I approach you. That's just kind of my way to keep people engaged. So why am I here? Why am I doing this? My niece and nephew are students at Bishop Hartley High School. And when I went to my niece's new student orientation, the guidance counselor was saying that they had a relationship with the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office to discuss responsible use of social media technology, but that the relationship had been severed because the prosecutor's office no longer had the funding. So I was thinking to myself, that sounds interesting. That's kind of what I do. And so I said to her, Mrs. Coletti, if you need someone to talk about this topic, I'm happy to do it. This is kind of what I do every day. And she said, sure. And so I've been doing this now for maybe like a year and a half. I've spoken at Hartley, I've spoken at All Saints, I've spoken at South High School, a couple of other places. I've always engaged with students. They are my favorite people in the world. And so this is kind of like my reasonable service. The Bible talks about offering whatever your reasonable service is. So for me, this is a part of my reasonable service. And so today, we're going to talk about everything that you see here: social media, cyberbullying, sexting, and students. When doing what feels right goes wrong, so let's start with interaction. How many of you have cell phones? Of course. How many of your students have cell phones? Okay. How many of you check the content of your students' cell phones, social media presence? Hands are getting fewer or fewer. Let me ask all of you, how many of you would be totally comfortable with the content of your phone such that you would allow me to read all of that content right now? Good. How many of you could say the same about what's on your students' phones? Fewer hands. That's kind of the problem. If you are not totally certain about the content of your students' phones, then there is the distinct possibility that one day, inadvertently, they could appear before me. Some of that content could lead to criminal charges. I'll just let that sit in the room for a second. And the consequence of a criminal charge involving what we call sexting is that a person has to register as a sex offender for 15 years, 25 years, or a lifetime, just by sending or receiving sexual images. That could result in lifetime sex offender registration, which of course impacts your ability to live in certain places, to go to certain schools, to have certain types of jobs. What we know is that 20 to 25% of students have sent what is considered a sext. If there are 60 parents here today, 15 of your students have sent a sext. Let that sit in the air for a second as well. I'm sorry? We'll talk about the definition of sexting in just a second. We will get into that, and I'll start with you and get a definition in just a second. Okay. So 15 of your students potentially have sent a sext. Cyberbullying and bullying. I'm going to read these statistics because there are a lot of them. About 20% of students ages 12 to 18 experienced bullying nationwide. Nationwide, 19% of students in grades 9 through 12 report being bullied on school property in the 12 months prior to the survey. The bullying happened in a hallway or stairwell, a classroom, cafeteria, outside on school grounds, online or text, or bathroom or locker room. Approximately 46% of students ages 12 to 18 who were bullied during the school year notified an adult at school about bullying. So that's what we're talking about today. How those things impact your students personally and through the justice system. And so there's a great question. What is sexting? Sir, what is it?
I thought it was just a text, but
It could be.
there's no imaging associated with it, right?
There could be.
Well, then that's something different.
Not necessarily. It's sending a sexually explicit image or wording.
See, that's why I don't understand this EXT part.
That's text.
Well, that implies texting.
It does. It does. But it could be a video.
Well, then it's not sexting anymore, it's pornography.
What would you call it?
I would call it pornography. If it's got an image, then it's pornography.
If it's transmitted electronically using a text, then it's sexting. Yeah. I mean, we're not here to argue. I'm not here to argue. What I'm here to do is ensure that your students don't have to appear before me when I'm far less friendly. That's my job, is to ensure that I never see them. Because here's the deal. If we want to be honest, and Principal Ruth knows me, I'm just a very practical person. Your zip codes do not insulate you from this kind of behavior. Attending St. Pius does not insulate you from your child potentially appearing before me. Your faith does not insulate you from this kind of behavior. And more often than not, your students are participating in things based on peer pressure, based on wanting to be liked, based on wanting to be included, that they may not share with you. And by the time you may find out about it, or by the time that Principal Ruth finds out about it, there is a different level of action and attention that will be taken that will then be out of your control. And the consequences that I impose as a judge are certain. They are intractable. The law requires that I do certain things. I don't have a choice. Your love for your child doesn't prevent me from doing what it is that I am required to do under the law. And so whatever we may call it, the law views it in a certain way. And definitionally, it is disseminating lewd images. It could be pornography. It's called unlawful, I'll give you some of the legal terms. We're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves, but I'm happy to do that. Pandering sexually oriented matter involving a minor. That's creating, recording, photographing, filming, developing, reproducing, or publishing any material that shows a minor or impaired person participating or engaging in sexual activity. Advertising for sale or dissemination, sale, distributing, transporting, disseminating any material that shows a minor or impaired person participating or engaging in sexual activity. And so the pornography doesn't necessarily have to be two people being in an intimate space. It could be your child showering and then that child sending that image to another person. And there's a video that I'll show you that demonstrates just that kind of nuance. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, what about like with the kids sharing questionable YouTubes? Because they're the ones putting it on, posting it and then sharing it.
If it includes nude or lewd images of minors in an impaired state,
Then it's considered.
it's still disseminating material. And that's a felony of the second degree in the state of Ohio. That's punishable at a maximum of 8 to 12 years in prison, just by sending that one image or that one video, if it includes minors. I'm sorry?
Well, they're at the age where they're starting to search because they're getting, questionable. And
Absolutely.
interested in not only their body changes, but relationships, and especially when you see on TV, the the HIV meds and stuff like that, and so they're beginning to question sexuality, and I find them kind of starting to search the internet,
Absolutely.
and that's worrisome.
And it's up to parents and guardians and adults to monitor and to measure their time for exploring all of those things. Here's what I found in talking to parents. Can everybody hear me? Here's what I found in talking to parents. Sometimes parents and guardians want to assign the responsibility of monitoring technology to someone else. And so I have a lot of parents who ask me, what resources are available for me to help my child in navigating this space? You're the first resource. Are you paying the phone bill? Everybody in here paying the bill? They're living in your home, right? So it's up to you to monitor what it is that they are doing. But sometimes we as adults use technology to distract our young people so that we can do the things that we need to do. It becomes their companion as we do all of the things that we need to do as adults. And so when they're in their rooms and you're doing your thing and they're doing their thing, we don't know what they're doing. I've had to check my nephews and nieces' cell phones. I said, hey, Amy needs to see your phone, see what you're doing, what you're watching, what you're sending. It's an uncomfortable conversation because we don't want our children to see us as the antagonist. But you can be the antagonist or I can. And if I'm the antagonist, it's a whole different story. It's a completely different story. So let's get into the definition. I normally do this for students so they can see that I was actually young once upon a time. Uh-oh, is this not gonna work? Miss Buzinski? There. So that's me at St. Joseph Montessori School many years ago. That's my student ID from Bishop Hartley. That's the picture that hangs in the courthouse. So we're talking about good uses and bad uses of technology, playing games, connecting with new and old friends, saving important photos, and of course those bad uses, cyberbullying and sexting. Here's the definition of cyberbullying: sending hurtful or threatening emails or instant messages, spreading rumors, posting embarrassing photos of others to cause the bullying. That's from the American Psychological Association. And that is, of course, using technology, IG, Snapchat, Facebook to do those kinds of things. Using your phone. Sexting, sending or receiving sexual pictures, messages, or videos through technology. Cell phone, app, email, or webcam. Cell phone, app, email, or webcam. The word sexting is a combination of the words sex and text. So it's not just cell phone, it's any of those apps that we can use, any technology that could be used to send those kinds of images. I want to show this video that talks about the import and impact of bullying on students. Hopefully this will play and you will.
By all appearance.
Let's just get through that.
Appearances, Ryan Senek is a happy, healthy 11-year-old girl. She loves her stuffed animal named
Wolfie.
dogs and reading.
This is the kind of books I read.
But this was Ryan a mere 3 weeks ago, bruised and bullied.
She just popped out and said, "You're gonna fight me." I said, "I don't want to fight you."
A fellow 6th grader cornered Ryan in the Turrentine Middle School locker room while others stood by taking videos.
Started kicking me, punching me, stomping me, hitting me in the front, back, in the back of my head, my ribs, all over my back.
The proof in the pictures taken at the doctor after the attack.
11-year-olds planned an attack on another 11-year-old, and it's scary.
Mom Carly says she got a concussion, but it could have been worse.
Ryan is epileptic, so this could have been a deadly thing. She did hit her right in her frontal lobe, which is where Ryan's epilepsy is. I'm very lucky that I'm not planning my child's funeral instead of sitting here.
The ordeal too emotional for Ryan to talk about at times.
Are you okay? Hey, you don't want to talk anymore. Okay.
Carly says Ryan has even been diagnosed with PTSD.
I don't know how to protect her. I don't know what to do to help her.
Let me be clear, bullying is not just something that's not that big of a deal.
Appearances.
Under the law,
Investigating a woman who allegedly abandoned
that
a
is
2-year-old
considered
little boy at a stranger's front
assault.
doorstep, and then she just ran away. Surveillance video shows him.
bullying is considered under the law assault. That's causing or attempting to cause serious physical harm to any person. It could be from a felony of the 2nd degree up to a felony of the 5th degree. Penalties from 8 to 12 years in prison to as little as 12 months in prison. So when you think about these things that are happening at school, oh, it's not a big deal, oh, it's not impactful, there are real-time consequences if your child is engaging in this kind of behavior. There are real-time consequences if you are engaging in this kind of behavior. We can't pretend as if these things happen in isolation. Our children are learning how to behave from how we behave. And we've got to take accountability for that. So I want to show this video when we talk about sexting, and I think it crystallizes the conversation that we had just a little while ago. I'll make it a little bigger. Okay, so for those who couldn't see the text, what we see is a young woman who is preparing to go to a dance. Her boyfriend, friend, whatever you want to call him, asks, "What are you going to wear?" So it starts off innocently enough, and she's showing him the different outfits potentially that she could wear. Then the behavior starts to escalate. Finally ending with her deciding to send a picture of herself to him in the shower. And then what happens? It's all over. It's everywhere. He sends it to the people that he knows. They send it to the people that they know. And she has lost control of the image. I had a case where a defendant had stored on his computer 40 to 50,000 images and videos. I didn't look at all the images and videos. I have no idea what young people were included in those videos. I had no idea. And who knows where all of those images went? How many other people accessed those images? And so once your young person sends something like that, whether it's through a text, whether it's through an email, whether it's through a video, they lose control of the image. And it is then open for public consumption. And I will tell you that employers, colleges, and universities do deep sea social media dives. They are checking everything that your young people are sending to one another, and that may be the thing that precludes them from attending the college or university of their choice or getting the job of their choice. I had another case that it was a murder case. The alleged murderer filmed the murder on Snapchat and uploaded the video to Snapchat, which I understand disappears after a certain amount of time. Well, I had an officer come to me and ask me to sign a warrant so that they could reach out to Google to access the video. It exists forever. It exists forever. There's not enough metadata, whatever they call it, to get rid of anything that any of us has created. It's not just our kids, it's us. It exists forever, and there are potential legal consequences and practical consequences for those choices. Any questions? Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
You have mentioned several times about sending images of minors. What if they're sending images that are not minors? Or what if they include sexually explicit pictures of animals, not necessarily so adults and animals,
Sure.
not just minors?
This statute that I read, disseminating images includes bestiality.
Okay.
So you're not exempt.
I mean, like cartoons.
It depends on what's depicted.
Okay.
If it's still sexual in nature, there is no legal delineation for if it's a cartoon image. And I think that's probably a great point that I want to make. You don't want to encourage your young people to try to create these nuances where they feel like, well, if I send it by email, then it's really not sexting. If it's a cartoon that's pornographic in nature, then it's really not illegal. This is not the place where you want to try to thread the needle. You don't want to do that here.
Did you mention earlier that receiving a text like that would make them accountable? Like, how do they avoid receiving?
Potentially, I think that the most important thing to do if your child receives is to notify someone immediately. I can't tell you how many defendants flip a script, and it really wasn't me, it was your child. So notify someone immediately. If it's Principal Ruth, if it's another counselor, notify authorities so that your child doesn't get caught up in the web of being blamed for sending or receiving that kind of image.
That's
Yes.
what I wanted to piggyback off of you. I always tell my kids, the new thing is airdrop, so they can be on the bus. Someone could send something very inappropriate, and I always say, if you take that airdrop that goes to those 30 kids on the bus, you're held accountable.
Absolutely.
That's
So
true.
it's important that they could potentially be held accountable. If they don't immediately distance themselves from that transmission, and the web starts to unravel, and then Principal Ruth is involved, and she's talking to the 25 other, and they blame your child, and your child has said nothing, potentially that could be a problem. It's very nuanced, and so I don't want to give you, yes, it's definitely gonna happen, no, it's not gonna happen, but it's always important that if your child is involved, for your child to speak up immediately. Immediately. Anything else? Yes.
Does immediately deleting it help with culpability or anything like that?
I would not immediately delete.
I'm worried about the kid whose friend sends it, they say, don't send me this stuff and delete it, but.
I would keep the don't send me the stuff and the video. just as an initial matter until you notify an authority figure. I'm big on documenting and keeping evidence. And so if you start deleting, it infers, maybe incorrectly, that your child is guilty of something.
The concern I think the child is gonna have is, I don't wanna get my friend in trouble.
Yeah,
I don't wanna get in trouble.
Yeah, it's forget about the friend.
Yeah.
I mean, I just have to be honest. You know, this is not a space where you want to save anyone else before you save yourself. And that's a tough lesson for kids because acceptance and inclusion is so important at every age. It's important for adults. I know adults who can't manage this space really well.
The kid's gonna think, if I say anything about this, the judge said my friend's gonna go to jail for 10 years.
Well, I mean, that's a possibility. Maybe not 10. The minimum is 2 years. But here's the thing, and this is where the parenting conversation gets tough. You've got to help your kids understand how important it is to protect themselves. I see a lot of kids who spend an inordinate amount of time protecting other people, and they're now at one of the state's 9 institutions. So it's this dicey conversation that you have to have, and you have to help your kid understand how important their own personal integrity is and how important it is to look out for themselves. Because the desire to preserve and to protect someone else could also be related to a level of bullying that exists. I'm the first to admit that this is super, super tough to manage. I will absolutely concede that point. I'm running on time, so there's a couple things. I want to notify all of you about these apps. I've got handouts so that you can get them before you leave. 21 popular apps that young people are using. Please pay attention to the calculator app. It's not a calculator app. It's a place where images can be stored and you will never know. There's a code that can be input and then they can download and keep these images. Hot or Not was one of the websites or apps that was referenced for places where people are being bullied. I know that all of these apps, every friend who sends your child a friend request on IG or Snap may not be another 12-year-old. It could be a 54-year-old who lives in California. And there was an article out of Florida, Operation Intercept yields 25 arrests. And I'll just tell you some of the things. One person was charged with use of a computer to solicit a child to commit a sex act and traveling to solicit a child to commit sex acts. Another was charged with use of a computer to solicit a child to commit a sex act. All of these were people using computers to solicit children to commit sex acts. Transmission of harmful materials to children. This is what's happening. These are adults who are pretending to be children. In Franklin County, we have what's called ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. I just sentenced an individual who was attempting to solicit what he believed to be a 15-year-old for sex.
Death penalty?
No.
Maybe that's the problem.
Well, since we're going here, I'll go there. That's a legislative issue. What I do is sentence. I don't write the law. I just interpret the law. So if you don't like the way the law looks, vote in your local elections.
Not to get too far on a tangent, but is there any, when it's minor to minor, does that differentiate anything?
In terms of potential penalty?
Sure. When
No.
a 12-year-old sending something to their 12-year-old friend.
No. Well, here's what happens. I work in adult court. There's a juvenile court. If the juvenile court says that that young person cannot be rehabilitated by the age of 21, they're then bound over to adult court and they're subject to the same penalties as adults. I've sentenced 14, 15, 16-year-olds before. So age doesn't insulate children from the consequences. Okay, so Those are some of the most popular apps. Let me ask you this quickly. Kids are using secret codes to text one another so that you don't know what's going on. Who can tell me what GNOC means? GNOC. GNOC. Anybody want to take a guess? I'm running out of time, I'll tell you. Get naked on cam.
That's where I was going with it too.
Okay, PAL. PAL. Parents are listening. KPC. KPC. I hear somebody kind of saying it. Keeping parents clueless. These are real codes that students are using to communicate with one another so that you don't know what they're discussing.
Give me that sheet.
I'm gonna give you a cheat sheet. I've got cheat sheets for everybody. So come and pick one of these up as well. Principal Ruth, I'm terrible on time, aren't I? Okay, so let me jump to the end. Because I love the engagement, there's a whole sexting, has a language. Here are some of those practical consequences. Diminished respect. You'd be surprised at what students are calling one another. Depleted opportunities, loss of scholarships, access to work or education, we talked about that. Loss of friendships. Why cyberbullying is a bad idea. Health complaints, students don't want to come to school because they know that it's going to be a volatile environment. Using alcohol, other drugs, tobacco, depression, and anxiety. And criminal convictions. And then we talked about creating that digital footprint. Everything that they create on social media remains forever. You see some of those practical consequences: removal from school, criminal prosecution. And then there are some of those legal consequences that we discussed, from up to 8 years in prison all the way down to 180 days of local jail time for what's called telecommunications harassment, which is bullying somebody through the use of your technology repeatedly. That is telecommunications harassment. That is a criminal charge. Again, someone asked about children being subject to penalties. Here in, I think it was Macedonia, the court upheld the conviction of a juvenile in 2014 who sexted images of himself having sex with a girlfriend. In the Cleveland suburb of Macedonia, middle schoolers were caught engaging in a competition to see who could obtain the most nude photos of female classmates. This isn't college students, folks. These are middle schoolers. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, middle schoolers. They were put into a diversion program, which means if you do all of these things, then you won't have a criminal conviction. If you don't do those things, you will be adjudicated delinquent, and that will forever be a part of your record. So again, please don't believe that your children are insulated from these kinds of incidents. Macedonia is a very affluent suburb in the Cleveland area. And so I'm a believer. There are some scriptures, loving your neighbor as yourself. Since I came to a Catholic school, I went to Catholic school. I thought about the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. That's what you've got to tell your young people. They need to be sowing love. Avoiding the temptation of sexting. Your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, and we don't want him living and dwelling in a filthy place. Okay? So what can you do as parents? Be watchful, be consistent, be the parent. Don't let these little terrorists tell you what they're gonna do. You're in charge. You're in charge. You pay the bill. You make the decisions about when, where, how, and why your children are using technology. And then I'll tell the students that stuff later. Any questions before I let you go? Any questions at all? Yes?
Do you have any recommendations as far as, like, if you find something on your child's phone trying to reach out to another parent,
their boundaries respectfully. Because let's be honest, we're living in a kind of aggressive times. And so walking to somebody's home may not be the best idea. It may not be the best idea. It worked out. But you never know. You just don't know. So maybe it's sending a letter, maybe it's taking someone with you, maybe it's facilitating that conversation through your school.
But you would not want to send an image that someone sent you to.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Just the letter itself. My child received this from your child.
Okay.
But yeah, be careful about approaching people. That could get dicey. I've seen it happen. Anybody else?
Do we have a privilege of having you talking to our kids?
I'm going there next.
Fifth through eighth graders will hear her, so.
I'm going there next.
Fifth through eighth, yes, we'll hear her today, so yes. And I wanna say absolutely, like, please talk to other parents. Like, I always said that to my children's friends, parents and stuff, like, if my kid's doing something, tell me, like, I